Hello, everybody. I am so excited to be here today, and I'm honored to be able to share with you some information that is on our minds lately. Uh, I want to talk to you today about how to support our immune system and do it from a holistic standpoint. So, before I really get started on all of this, I wanted to take a minute and explain to you how I got into this space. Like so many others, I was trained traditionally, traditional Western medicine, and practiced that way for many, many years. And like so many in the holistic space, it took a health challenge of my own to really wake me up and let me see what else is out there. You see, it's probably 13 years ago now, in the span of 12 months, 1 year, I was diagnosed with cancer and two autoimmune diseases. Well, I had certainly given this advice plenty of times, and I knew the routine. And I knew that from the Western perspective, the treatment for cancer is cut it out and kill it. Simple. Autoimmune disease, it's more supportive, and the paradigm is the disease is permanent and progressive. Well, it was different when it was my diagnosis. Suddenly, that was not an acceptable answer. And I started doing a lot of research. You know, at that point, I had celiac disease. That was one of my autoimmune diseases, and I had severe malabsorption. There was so much damage to my gut that I was down to 103 pounds. I was mildly anemic. Progression wasn't an option. My thyroid, according to my endocrinologist, there was no functional thyroid tissue left. I would be on medication for the rest of my life, and I would slowly need to get to higher doses. Well, I didn't want to be on pills for the rest of my life. So I started looking to see what other people were doing and researching, and I found a lot of information about how to use food, herbs, lifestyle to support my immune system. Because basically, this was a breakdown of immune system from every standpoint, from the cancer to the autoimmune diseases. And over time, with a lot of trial and error, I managed to heal my gut. I now have such a diverse diet. I've gained the weight back. I'm healthier and stronger than I've been in decades. And I'm off thyroid medication. I don't need it. So the paradigm was challenged. So when about 5 years ago, when my cat decided to get sick and be my teacher, she was probably 11 years old at the time, um, and she suddenly stopped eating. Now, this was a cat that was so food motivated that my daughter, when she was only 8 years old, was able to teach this cat to sit, lay down, and give her paw for a treat. So when she stopped eating, we knew there was a big problem. And in fact, she was diagnosed with severe pancreatitis, severe inflammatory bowel disease, and possibly intestinal cancer. Sound familiar? Well, I knew the paradigm on that as well. Not a whole lot can be done. We can damp down the symptoms, we can make them feel better for a while, but these cats typically recur, they relapse, and over time, this progresses. Not acceptable. And I knew what I had done for myself, and so I tried it on the cat. Challenge was I am basically an herbivore, right? I ate a plant-based diet. Physiologically, I am designed to eat plants. She's an obligate carnivore. She's got to eat meat. That puts a little bit of a spin on the way we approach that healing process. And again, lots of research, a little bit of trial and error, but I was way ahead of the curve on that one. And we got her back to eating. She is doing fantastic, and here she is enjoying life at 16. She's calmed down quite a bit since her younger days, but she hasn't missed a meal, and she is definitely calmer and enjoying, much more comfortable than she's ever been. So I want to give you today a whole an overview of what holistic immune support means. And holistic simply means that we're looking at everything. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the immune system because to tell you we're going to support the immune system is kind of a big, broad project. And until you really understand the different aspects of the immune system, it's hard to really understand how to focus your treatment depending on what your goal is. And of course, right now, our goal is to support our immune system against infectious diseases, virus that's causing havoc around the world right now. But again, fighting infectious diseases has different meaning depending on what kind of infection we're dealing with. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the different options there as well. And then we'll get into the nitty gritty. We'll start talking about some herbs that you can use that stimulate the immune system, kill some bacteria, viruses, and fungi, and different ways that they can be used. And then a little bit on nutritional supplements, because the reality is if you don't have the building blocks to make those immune cells, to get the processes going, doesn't matter how many herbs, how much you stimulate the immune system, if the tools aren't there, the foundation's not there, it's not going to work. We've got to have base nutritional level. And there are certain nutritional uh, aspects that need to be supported. So we'll talk about that as well. And of course, the thing that's near and dear to my heart, I've got to talk about diet. You can't talk about the immune system. You can't talk about anything, but the immune system in particular, you can't talk about it without talking about diet. Sorry, getting ahead of myself here. And then I'm going to briefly touch on lifestyle. So we'll move on here. So the immune system is made up of multiple different components. The white blood cells, you've probably heard of, they do that white blood cell count when they do your blood count. It's kind of like the military. And like the military, there's different branches, right? We have the Air Force, we've got the Marines, we've got the Navy, we've got the Army, we've got all these different branches. There are different types of white blood cells. There are lymphocytes and macrophages and neutrophils, and they each have their own job. So we support the white blood cells. We may be supporting one type of white blood cell, which means that we're supporting one type or one portion of that immune system. So that's important to understand. And then in addition to the white blood cells, we have what are called antibodies, which are specific chemical components that target certain pathogens, certain organisms that are causing a problem. Or sometimes they target allergens. That doesn't always help us feel a whole lot better and doesn't really do much good for us. But those are antibodies. And then there's complements, which are another group of compounds that help to control the response and keep that inflammation, hopefully keep the inflammation balanced. Because we need inflammation to heal, and to get rid of all the bad stuff, but we need to then dampen it down. And the complement is where that all comes in. So the antibodies and the complement are kind of like the weapons and the controllers in this whole process of the immune system. So that just kind of gives you a little bit of an overview of what we're dealing with. It's not a simple, supporting the immune system. We can't support all of those white blood cells and the controllers and the weapons all at the same time. We're going to be supporting different aspects of it. Not always just one, but they're bits and pieces that are going to get supported, not the whole thing. And then we have infectious agents. And our friend the virus, this COVID-19, clearly tells us that viruses may be small, but they are powerful. So viruses are kind of a weird group. When I was in school, they were alive. They're no longer alive now. They're basically just a little bit of genetic material, either DNA or RNA, not both. And they have just an outer capsule. So in terms of biological systems, they don't technically eat anything. They don't technically grow. They use our cells or our animal cells or plant cells to reproduce themselves. And in the process, they kill those cells. And so they're very different. It's not something, I know we have what we call virucides or virucidal drugs, but they don't actually kill because it's never alive. Kind of a weird concept and not terribly important, but just an interesting aspect to throw in there. And then we've got bacteria. They are much more complex, but still, they don't have an actual nucleus. They're still very simple organisms. They are alive. They do eat. They do reproduce. And the vast majority of bacteria are our friends. And that's probably true of viruses as well. And I think that's really important that we need to understand. I know when I was growing up, the idea was bacteria, viruses, they're bad. We want to kill them all. That's what's gotten us into a lot of trouble, actually. The vast majority of bacteria in the environment, in our body, are here to help us. They're here to support us. They actually support our immune system. And we're going to get into that a little bit later on in the talk, but we don't want to kill them all. That's just not going to help us. In fact, that's going to make us sicker. We are part of this ecosystem. They are a part of us. And we need to honor them and we need to take care of them. And if we take care of the good ones, they'll keep the bad ones out. So let's kind of keep that in mind. But they're a different type of organism than the viruses. They are much bigger and reproduce and eat in different ways. And so there's different ways to kill them. And then fungi are a little bit more complex. So fungi, it's a big class of organisms, including the mushrooms that you eat for dinner. So everything from the slime mold, well, slime molds aren't quite, from the molds that grow on your bread to the fungi that infect our body. Candida is technically a fungus. Yeast are fungi. Um, there are also different fungal infections in different parts of the United States that cause havoc in many, many people and animals. Around here in the desert, Sonoran Desert, we have what's called valley fever or coccidiomycosis. There's blastomycosis and histomycosis. It's not the name of it. I can't think of it at the moment. In different parts of the country, I don't deal with it here, so I forgot about it. But those need to be addressed differently. And in fact, it's a different part of the immune system that typically goes after the fungi than what goes after the viruses or the bacteria. And so we need to keep that in mind when we're deciding what we're going to use to fight these things off. Depends what kind of infection you've got. So let's look at different ways that we can build that immune system. And I want to start out letting you know that plants and animals have co-evolved, right? The plants were here first. Animals kind of evolved with them, but we've needed those plants from the beginning of time. And there's archaeological evidence that humans have used plant medicine for 60,000 years. Been around for a long time, and it does a lot. There's a term called zoopharmacognosy. Great party term. You can throw that one around. A lot of fun. It refers to animals using plants as medicine. They will sometimes rub against certain trees or plants to get ticks and other ectoparasites off. You'll see this in your dog. You take your dog for a walk in a nice grassy area, and they will just search out those wide blade grasses. Well, most of the time, much of the time, that wide blade grass is what's called couch grass. Couch grass is actually very soothing to the gut. It can be an anti-parasiticidal. In other words, it will kill parasites in the gut, and has a number of other medicinal effects. So if your dog is searching it out and eating a little bit of it, that's fantastic. Let him eat it. If your dog or cat is just obsessive about eating the grass and going after especially this type of grass, you probably have a problem and you might want to see your vet. Bring in a stool sample, check for parasites first. That's an easy one. But if that's not it, then they're telling you the tummy hurts. So just a little bit of an aside. But and that's not to say that dogs have maintained that intelligence, that natural intelligence that a lot of our wild animals have. They've been domesticated a long time. They've forgotten just as we've forgotten. And there are dogs that will eat toxic plants. So I'm not saying just let them eat whatever they want, but I will say be aware. Think about it. Look at what they're eating. If you know they're non-toxic plants, go ahead and let them eat it because it may truly be something they need. If you're not sure, don't let them eat it. I see enough dogs that eat the wrong things and don't feel very good afterwards. But what can we use to actually help support our immune system? Now, there's actually many, many plants that kill infectious agents. They're fantastic. Thyme is a great antiseptic. You can use that in your mouth. You can use that obviously as a tea for throat infections, that kind of thing. You can take it in capsules, but throw it in your food. It tastes good, and you know what? It's going to help to keep you healthy. Okay, so some of these are herbs that are in your cabinet. They are just as effective as they are in the capsule. In fact, I kind of like putting them into the food because I think we get this kind of constant uh, buildup of the wonderful medicines that are in these plants. And that's not the only thing that thyme does. Thyme has so many other beneficial effects, but we're going to stay focused on mainly the infectious agents at this point. Olive leaf is another powerhouse, and olive leaf is antimicrobial, so it actually kills viruses, bacteria, and fungi. One of the few plants that actually goes after all three of those. Very, very potent, and can, in fact, I will use it. I have capsules of that one. And I don't get sick very often, but if I feel like I'm coming down with something that feels like an infection, I will take olive leaf each day for a few days until I forget, which means that I'm feeling better. And I really feel like it speeds things up and just gets it out of my system a whole lot faster. And then mullein is another amazing herb that can help, especially with upper respiratory and lower respiratory type infections. And we're going to talk about that one in a little bit later because that's going to show up in some of the supplements for animals. And then we've got herbs that support immune function, again, in different ways. But turmeric is, something we've heard about a lot in the news. The curcumin is the active ingredient in turmeric. It's just been studied quite a bit for its anti-cancer effects. That is an immune response. It's anti-inflammatory, so I actually use that along with boswellia for things like arthritis. Take down that inflammation and take care of the pain with the two of them. And it it is just such a healthy herb in so many other ways. So again, cook with it, throw it in your food, share it with the family, help to boost their immune system. That's going to be really powerful for everybody. I'm not sure that it's necessarily antiviral, but it will help to make you healthier and more resilient overall. Now, the mushrooms, there's a number of medicinal mushrooms out there. I'm showing you oyster and turkey tail, but there's reishi and cordyceps and um, maitake and shiitake. And they all kind of work in their own individual way, but the majority of the effect from these mushrooms is more of what we call a cell mediated immune response. So, cell mediated immune responses are used for cancer, number one. In fact, that's one of my number one treatments for my cancer patients. Um, and it's also important for things like fungal infections. So we can use a fungus to help fight another fungus. And I will also use these for my dogs that have valley fever, and just to help boost that immune response. And then we have these powerhouse herbs, things like licorice and garlic and echinacea, that are antimicrobial and immune supportive. Now, licorice is just an amazing herb. It has so many medicinal values. It's used a lot in Chinese medicine and a lot in Western medicine as well. It's anti-inflammatory, but it's also antimicrobial. It does support the immune system. It helps to balance out the adrenal gland. The caveat here is if you have high blood pressure, you need to be really cautious. It can actually raise your blood pressure. It can make things worse. So, if you have high blood pressure or you don't know, get advice from a health professional before you take licorice. But it can be helpful for, I've seen articles where it's been used for things like even regurg. Um, there's teas that you can make out of it. There's capsules. They actually put a little bit of it in my digestive enzymes that I have. So it's used for so many different things. It is just a powerhouse herb. Again, very potent. Need to have a little bit of advice with that one. Garlic, again, huge powerhouse. Throw it in your food. Oh my gosh, your food tastes better. Um, It, keeps the vampires away, but it also keeps the infections away. It's really a fantastic herb. If you want to do a little social distancing from your family, have a lot of garlic and don't feed them. No, no, feed them all. Keep them healthy. Let's throw it in the food. But garlic is just an amazing, powerful herb and food. I will say, in terms of our pets, high levels can be toxic, especially to cats. A small amount, go ahead and give it. Seriously, if it's just seasoning your soup, if it's just seasoning your vegetables, uh, that's fine. We get into trouble in the dogs when they're eating cloves of garlic, and a bigger dog would probably need to eat the whole bulb. Um, Cats are much more sensitive, so again, be much more cautious with them. And so, you can start to see these really powerhouse herbs. They're potent medicine, and we do need to be a little bit cautious when we're using these if we're not aware of all of the other effects that they have. Echinacea is another powerful one that I'm not aware of any negative side effects to it. I had read years ago, use it in the beginning of an infection to try and prevent that infection. But if you use it too long, it'll actually cause the white blood cells to drop. But since then, I've seen so many other articles that talk about continuing to use the echinacea throughout the infectious process. So the 10 to 14 days that you would normally take an antibiotic, you take the echinacea. I don't. It depends on who you're reading and what's going on. For me, again, it's typically I'll take the echinacea at the beginning along with the olive, and um, when I'm feeling better, I forget. So it self-regulates in that respect. Um, that one is good for our pets as well, and that will be in the supplement. So let me get into this. Um, I'm showing you just three animal essential products that I use quite a bit. The veterinary apothecary is also an animal essential product, but it is one that is only sold through veterinarians, and so that's something you need to get from your veterinarian. A little bit more potent, and so you need some guidance with that. Super immune is, as it suggests, it's an immune booster. It has olive leaf, it has echinacea, and it has eleuthero, which is uh, it's an adaptogen. So it helps us adapt to different situations. It helps our adrenal gland to kind of balance things out. And that combination has been fantastic. I will use that for some of my puppies that have parvo. I'll use it for some of these cats that have chronic upper respiratory infections, because a lot of the cats will have herpes or calicivirus that kind of sticks with them for the rest of their life. And any kind of stressful event can cause a flare up. Super immune is a great way to kind of keep that balanced out. And it may be something where they're on 5 days on, 2 days off. When we're using herbs in kind of a chronic manner, and that's something that I will do quite a bit. Respicom has mullein and something else in there that is antimicrobial that I'm forgetting right now, and then black cherry and another herb for coughing and respiratory problems. So this is a great one for infection of the upper respiratory tract, or even the lower respiratory tract, as it were. Um, this is my go-to for dogs with kennel cough, and it does help to kind of calm that cough. It also helps to get them through the infection a little bit faster. And then we have mushroom defense, and as I mentioned, this one has three mushrooms. This one has reishi, maitake, and cordyceps, I believe. Um, and I use this for my cancer patients, and so it will help to boost that cell-mediated immune response. And even my pets with fungal infections like valley fever, I will use it on them. So these are great products, and I want to talk to you about that for just a minute as well. When you're trying to choose herbal supplements or any kind of nutritional supplements, it's a huge challenge. Unfortunately, there's really not any federal regulation on these, and there have been many, many instances where um, the government will go in periodically and pick up a few supplements from different stores, and they will analyze them to see if what's in the bottle is the same as what's on the label. And unfortunately, we'll have 70 to 80% of them that will fail. So, how do you do it? How do you know what to use? Well, we're lucky on the veterinary side. I mentioned that I use the Animal Essentials products. They all have that NASC seal. And in fact, the founder of the company, Greg Tilford, who is a master herbalist, travels around the world teaching herbal medicine. He's one of the founders of the National Animal Supplement Council. And having this seal of approval is really very potent. It's more encompassing than any of the other things that we have on the human side. So this will verify the product quality. It'll verify lack of toxins and pathogens within the products. It'll also verify the facilities are in that good manufacturing practice situation where they are doing things the way that they should be. Okay, facilities are clean. People are handling the products in the appropriate way. So that is a nice overall seal and verification of the quality of your products. Um, if it doesn't have that seal, it doesn't mean that they're not good. It's just that I can't evaluate it. I don't know, and that gets to be a huge challenge for me as well as for you in trying to choose things. On the human side, we don't have as many options. The USP verified is a great seal in that USP is US Pharmacopoeia. It tells us that the active ingredient or the ingredients in that product have been verified to be exactly what they're supposed to be. The problem is that most plants, I don't believe, show up on the pharmacopoeia list. And so you can't get that seal for a plant-based medicine for the most part. I think turmeric may be one of the few that it's available for. It's good for your vitamins and minerals, but unfortunately doesn't really help us all that much with the herbs. Having the seal, though, does verify good manufacturing practice certified. So that means that the facilities have also been checked out. It's clean. They're doing things appropriately. Now, I wanted to put this good manufacturing practice seal up here to show you. This one's a challenge. Um, if it says certified, that's great. There is no standard seal. So when I went online to try and get a seal to show you what it looks like, there's probably 20 different versions. And some of them will just say that they're GMP registered. That just means they registered the company. It doesn't mean that anybody has ever come in to inspect the facility. It doesn't mean anything. Okay, so be really cautious about that. You've got to read. It's hard. I mean, everything's little tiny print, so it's hard to read. But really, if you're going to look for the seals to verify the product quality, to make sure that it actually says certified. I would be cautious of a product that puts on there that they're just registered, because why say that if they're not trying to hide something? Maybe that's maybe I shouldn't be so negative about things like that, but it does make me pause. So we've talked about some herbs that can be really powerful, really helpful for us and for our pets. Now I want to talk about nutritional supplements. And as I mentioned, we need that base. We need these different vitamins and minerals for the pathways, for the processes to occur, sometimes for certain white blood cells to even be produced, but for antibody production. And they all, again, work in different places and different processes through the whole system. But if any part of the system is broken down because of a deficiency, the rest of the system is weaker. Okay, we can understand that. Now, vitamin A typically is most important for the mucous membrane. So that's your um, entry point for many, many of the organisms. So things like upper respiratory infections, lower respiratory infections like pneumonia, um, and things coming into the digestive tract. Vitamin A is important for the antibodies that line those membranes and that help to recognize things that don't belong and get rid of them before they can cause any problem. Vitamin C is one that we've all heard about for its amazing effects. There's all kinds of stuff on the internet about taking massive doses of vitamin C to prevent COVID or to treat the COVID. I don't know. I don't know how valid those are. Vitamin C is generally pretty safe. Even at very high doses, it's going to cause diarrhea, usually before it causes any other problems. It's water soluble. You're usually going to pee it out. The challenge is If you or your pets have calcium oxalate stones, don't use it. It's going to make those stones worse. And so, again, these things all need to be in balance. We can't just throw one thing out there and say, this is going to fix it all and there's no problem with it. Just keep taking a whole bunch of it. It doesn't work that way. Things need to be balanced. So, vitamin C is a great one. Go ahead and take some if you don't have any bladder stones or kidney stones, and it's not going to hurt anything, but I'd rather you got it from food. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Vitamin D is a huge challenge for people, at least, and even for our pets. Vitamin A and vitamin D are both what we call fat soluble vitamins. The fat soluble vitamins are the ones that we can get too much of. We can get toxic effects, and vitamin D toxicity is very serious, as is vitamin A. But vitamin D toxicity can cause kidney failure and death. So we don't want to go too high, but low vitamin D is associated with all cause death, increased cancer and infection and inflammation and all kinds of things. And so, again, balance is the key. Vitamin D for us, the majority of it should come from the sun. Herbivores can turn that sunlight into vitamin D within our skin. And for people who are in office buildings all day long, people in the north that really you don't have as much sunshine access, especially in the winter, will typically be low in vitamin D. And of course, that's a big part of our population, right? Vitamin D in food only comes from animal products. Now, there is one source, and it's kind of a fun one, but mushrooms that are exposed to sunlight, mushrooms can also do that conversion and create vitamin D within their tissue. So, if you want to take some of your button mushrooms or your what are the other ones that I always get? The portobello mushrooms. Throw them out in the sun for about 12 hours. You're going to get some pretty potent vitamin D in there. Do that periodically, and that'll really help to boost your vitamin D. Otherwise, your sources are going to be all animal. And in fact, animals in the wild know this. They're going to go for the organ meat, which is where vitamin D is really concentrated. So your liver and kidney are going to have pretty high levels. And for our pets, that's really important because if if they're not getting organ meats, which most of our processed foods don't include any organ meats in them, then there are added synthetic vitamin D supplement to the food, and we've seen that that has gotten us into trouble as well because there was some toxicity in some of the foods because somebody made a mistake in the calculations. So again, food-based is much safer. It's harder to overdose on that, but that's an important one to remember that we need to keep that one up at adequate levels, and that can be tested relatively easily. Iron, selenium, and zinc are also really important components. We hear about zinc periodically for the upper respiratory infections. Again, it helps with the mucous membranes. Zinc and selenium are real challenges in terms of sourcing because it really does depend on the soil that those plants are grown in. And so, if the soils are depleted, which much of our industrial farmland has been depleted of these minerals, because all they're putting back in there is the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. They don't put a whole lot of these minerals back in there. And in the process of killing weeds and all the other pesticides they're putting on there, they're killing the bacteria and fungi that would normally grab those minerals from the lower soil or from the rocks that are in the soil and put those into the plants. And that's just not happening the way it used to. So much of our food is depleted of selenium and zinc, and many of us are depleted as well, and that's going to wreak havoc on our immune system. Iron, again, we can get from red meat. So if you're eating red meat periodically, you're probably getting enough iron, but that can also be an issue, and that's really important for the white blood cell production and maturation. So now we're really going to get into my area of expertise here, and that's gut health. Now, I put it here, gut health is crucial to the immune health. It's crucial to our entire health. The gut, to me, it doesn't matter what's going on in your body for the most part. If we don't get the gut healed, we're not going to clear the problem. We got to treat the symptoms, but we've got to get the gut healed. And so one of the reasons I say that is this GALT, or GALT, gut-associated lymphoid tissue, this lines the entire intestinal tract. And if you think about it, the intestine is like a tube, right? And it's a tube that allows the outside in. And we have a skin as a barrier to the outside. But when food comes in, you got the apple that was on the tree, it was outside, you take a bite of it, now you're letting the outside in. And we don't want everything from the outside in us. But at the same time, we have to allow some things through to get the nutrients in. So that barrier along the whole gut is critically important for keeping the outside out, but allowing the nutrients in so that we can be strong and healthy. So this gut associated lymphoid tissue helps to identify what's good and bad. And if something leaks through, it's going to stop it and protect it. That actually amounts to 70 to 80% of your immune system. Now just think, if that immune system gets geared up, right? Army is on high alert because we've had invaders. We don't know where they're coming from, but it's a huge area. There's a big border to patrol. We're on high alert. We've set off the other aspects of the military and put them on high alert as well, and said, watch out for these guys. We're going to try and stop them here, but if we miss them, you guys got to get them on the inside. Okay. So if your gut's inflamed, your body's inflamed. You may not feel the symptoms yet, but it's there. Okay. And that's something that's really, really important for all of us to understand. So that's one aspect. The other is our gut microbiome. The gut microbiome is the collection of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that call our gut home. They are the keepers of our health. They are what we need to protect. When we're eating, we're feeding our gut microbiome as much as we're feeding ourselves. That microbiome makes, I think, 4 different B vitamins and most of the vitamin K, which is important for clotting, for blood clotting, in our system. There's more serotonin, which is the calming hormone for the brain, neurotransmitter. There's more serotonin made in our gut than there is in our brain, if we have the right bacteria. If we don't, you might feel a little anxious, edgy. The gut microbiome is also a physical barrier, if you will. Think of it as a neighborhood. You've got this nice neighborhood, it's well manicured, and the riffraff starts to come in. Well, they're not going to make any headway because everything is nice and clean, and anybody's going to notice if there's a little bit of a change and kick them out. But what if the area gets hit with, say, a hurricane? Now you've got a lot of houses that are damaged. The people that are left there are just struggling to try to stay alive, and they don't notice that somebody moved into that empty house down the road, right? And they don't notice that they're creating more problem and more damage. And maybe they've found a way to, get out through some secret passage into the rest of the community. So the gut microbiome is kind of like that. It's protecting that whole neighborhood. But if the gut gets hit, and it can get hit by a bacteria or a virus, a pathogenic one that does make it through, but a lot of what it's getting hit by are things like antibiotics. Wipe out part of them, part of the bacterial component that is protecting us. Even our anti-inflammatories, our non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, damage the gut and can kill some bacteria and change the environment in there. And so we can get holes in the gut where things can get through into the internal system. And so when food particles that maybe aren't fully digested get through because there's holes now, that can set off an immune response that will cause whole body inflammation. Okay. Now, food is crucial to gut health, and I think you can see that now that you've seen the that GALT and the microbiome. But Dr. Mark Hyman talks about this a lot, and I love this quote. He says, "Food is not just calories, it's information. It talks to your DNA and tells it what to do. And the most powerful tool to change your health is your fork." And you can see on the left, I have more of a meat-based component, which would go for our companion animals. And for their companion humans, we have this beautiful rainbow of different foods that has such a great assortment of phytonutrients in it. And so we want to look at the foods for each of them in that way. Now, Anne Wigmore adds to this, and she says, "The food you eat can either be the safest and most powerful form of medicine or the slowest form of poison." I can tell you, gluten was a very slow form of poison for me, and um, I didn't realize it. I had no idea until I was to the point where it was really, really serious. So I'm not saying it's always gluten. There are so many things in our food. If we're not eating the right things, we are doing damage, and we won't know for quite a while. So, how do we know what healthy food is? Well, we want it to be minimally processed. We want it whole. Did it just come out of the earth or just off of an animal? That's whole food. If it's in a package, probably been processed in some way or another. And that processing takes away some of the nutrition, but it also sometimes adds things that are not good for us and that can do more damage to the gut and create this downward spiral. Now, organically grown or containing minimal toxins. This is huge. And this is something that I talk about a lot with my clients. In fact, I'm going to be putting on a program here probably in the next 30 to 45 days, a half day program on just the basics of pet food, and choosing the right foods for your pets for optimal health. But the cleanliness of the food from the standpoint of these toxins is such a critical point. Um, we have all these pesticides that are in our food system. It's actually a little bit worse in their food system. There's their foods. We're used to feeding the kibble out of a bag. It's convenient. It's cheap. It's the way that we've been told is the best thing to feed our pets. But how healthy do you think you would be if you ate crackers all day long and that was all you got? Okay, they put some meat in there, they put some protein in there. That's great, but it's not a full diet and it's not whole food. So you're missing a lot of things when you do that. There's no variety, which is critical. We can't put everything into a food. I think it's arrogant of us to think that we can balance out a diet just by putting in synthetic vitamins and thinking that everything is good, because there's a lot we don't know. And then species appropriate. I mentioned that before with my cat and me. Very, very different foods, and we need to look at that. Now, there's lifestyle things that come into play with our immune health, and we hear this all the time, right? We get these messages constantly. Get some exercise, get some sleep, avoid the stress. That's easier said than done, but truly find the time. Exercise is important for hormone regulation. It can regulate your insulin and cortisol, but it also actually helps to balance out your gut microbiome and get your gut moving as well. But there are studies that show that after exercise, your gut microbiome does a little bit of a shift into a much healthier balance. So take a look at that, get some exercise. Just get out there and walk with your dog. You're both getting the exercise, you're getting the great outdoors, which is really critical, getting some sunshine, getting your vitamin D. So we can multitask here and get a lot of these things done just by a simple walk outside, and that will help to alleviate stress as well. Now, stress, of course, we know that raises the cortisol levels. That's our stress hormone. We need to keep that in balance. A little bit of stress, acute stress, like an exercise, is great for us, but it needs to come down. It's when it stays up high that it causes all kinds of problems. And rest like this kitty. Get some nice, restful sleep, because sleep is the time for healing and regeneration. And we've got to let our body get that rest. It's also a time when our gut really does a full cleaning, and we need to have fasting time for that. So while we're sleeping, our gut is kind of clearing, moving all that bacteria down through, getting ready for the next batch of food and the next regrowth of bacteria. So get some sleep, find a way. So health is really simple. It's just not always easy. And I get that. And it's a process and it's a matter of making choices every single day, and every little choice makes a huge difference. So even if you do one thing today, get out for a walk, choose a healthier food, have some fun. We just had a birthday party, a Zoom birthday party for my son, and we literally had people from all across the country, from California to Vermont, and we were playing games, and it was a lot of fun. It was great seeing everybody, and we all kind of got a chance to relax. So find a way to do any one of these things, and you're going to get into that habit of good health. And I just wanted to leave you with a beautiful picture. This is the desert blooming in spring. I am fortunate. This whole event happened in spring, and this is a perfect time to get out. And so I started taking pictures of things as they're blooming. The saguaro is actually from last year. It hasn't bloomed yet, but these others are all going pretty well now. And then for more information, if you want to follow me on any of these, my Instagram, my Facebook, LinkedIn, you can find me at petnutritiondoctor.com. If you want to instant message me or direct message me on any of these, if you're interested in learning more about pet food basics, again, this is a half-day course that I'm going to be giving in another month or two. Please go ahead and message me through that. I will get you on my mailing list. I'll make sure that I'll let you know. Thank you so much, guys. If you have questions, definitely leave them in the chat. I will answer whatever I can. And thank you so much.